Welcome back to Dezavi Productions. My name's Dezavi. Today, we're doing part 4 and the final part of the series of how to make a beat in Ableton Live. We'll be mixing and mastering the beat we made in the last 3 parts. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss a session. Without further ado, let's get to it. Alright guys, so here we have our session. Before we get started, I want to remind you that everybody's process of mixing and mastering is different. There truly is an art form to this, and this is why people win Grammys and awards for their way of mixing and mastering. What I'm showing you here today is the way that I personally approach the mixing and mastering process, and because today's tutorial is for beginners, we'll be using the stock plugins from Ableton that are available to everyone. One thing that I really want to emphasize is that you don't need expensive plugins for you to get a good mix. You can create a great mix using the stock plugins as long as you know how to use them. So with that being said, we're going to get started by cleaning up the instruments individually, starting with the piano. So we're going to switch over to session view by hitting tab on the computer keyboard. And if you remember, we added reverb to all of these tracks. Before we make any adjustments, we have to turn off this reverb. So we're going to go to the ascend on all of these tracks and turn the knob down. So turn it down. And now we can get started on the keys. So we're going to click on the track that has the keys, track 1, addictive keys. Now the first thing I want to do to the keys is I want to make them brighter by adding an EQ. So we're going to go to categories, go to audio effects. We're going to go to the EQ and filters folder. We're going to open this up a little bit. We're going to go to channel EQ, and these are all presets. Now, presets are a good starting point for you to use. Once you pull up the preset, you can make some adjustments within the plugin to reach the sound that you're shooting for. So we're going to go to Keys Bright, and we're going to click and drag this down into the device view. I'm going to solo the piano. And as we're playing this, I'm going to turn it off so you can hear the difference. So this is on, and this is off. And turn it back on. So it sounds good, but I'm going to make some adjustments so that I can get it to sound exactly the way that I want it to. So I'm going to go to the low frequency here, and I'm going to bump this up to a -3 because I don't want it to take out too much of that low end. I want it to stay nice and mellow. I'm going to leave the mid at 5, and the high, I'm going to drop this down to a 4. The output, I'm going to leave it at -1.4, and the mid frequency here, this is a number here, I'm going to switch this to 550. I'm going to leave the high pass filter off because I don't want the low end to be taken out. So let's go ahead and play this, and as we're playing it, we'll take it out so you can hear the difference. So this is on, and this is off. And if we turn it back on. Okay, so now we got it to sound a little bit brighter, and the next thing we're going to be adding is a compressor. Now, compression is probably one of the most difficult tools to understand if you've never used it before, so I'm going to try to explain it as best as I can as we're walking through it, but eventually I will be making a separate video going into depth as to what a compressor is and how to use it. So we're going to go to the search bar, and we're going to type in compressor. We're going to go to dynamics, compressor, and we're going to choose classical compression. So I'm going to click and drag this down into the device view. Now, there are 5 components about a compressor that you must understand. They are threshold, ratio, attack, release, and knee. Very quick, I'm going to explain what each one of these does, starting with the threshold. So the threshold is what determines the point at which the compressor will begin to compress. How that compression happens is determined by the ratio. The ratio is the ratio of input to output. So if you have a 2-to-1 ratio, for every 2 decibels that's input, 1 will be output by the compressor. If you have a 4-to-1 ratio, for every 4 decibels that's input, 1 will be output by the compressor. If you have a 5-to-2 ratio, for every 5 decibels that's input, 2 will be output by the compressor, and you can see how the pattern continues. The attack determines how quickly the compressor will work, and this is really dependent on the type of instrument you're working with and what you're trying to accomplish. The release determines how quickly or slowly the signal will go back to its original dynamics after it's dropped below the threshold. And last but not least, the knee here controls how soft or how hard the compression will happen. In the top right corner here, we have makeup. So anytime you're compressing, you're actually losing some of that decibel. So to make up for that, we have the makeup button. We're going to leave this at its peak here, and the dry and wet here is a really nice touch to this plugin because there is this thing called New York style compression or parallel compression, where you combine the dry and the wet signal to get a full dynamic. Luckily for us, this plugin has it here to where we can mix the dry and the wet signal together. So let's go ahead and play this. So as you can see, there's no compression happening. And me personally, I do not like this view, so I'm going to switch over to the graph view by clicking on the little button here in the middle in the bottom left-hand corner of the compressor. And I'm going to set the ratio to a 3:1. So I'm going to type in 3.00:1, enter. The attack, I'm going to leave at a 4 milliseconds. And the release, I'm going to change this to a 200. Now, where I want to set the threshold is really kind of in the balance of where the signal is sustained. So you can see it's kind of sustaining here. And then after it goes up higher, it just kind of peaks here and there. So I want to sustain it right here in the middle. So I'm going to drop the threshold down to about -23. And I want this to be a bit of a hard compression, so I'm going to drop the knee down to about a 2. When I drop the knee down, you're going to see 2 lines in the graph come closer together. Okay, let's go ahead and press play. So as you can see, when it hits that spike, it doesn't go up in volume, but it rather gets compressed. And that's the beauty of the compressor. And if you see here on the GR meter, this is your gain reduction. So you can see the compression that's actually happening. And the last thing I'm going to do to this compressor is I'm going to change the dry and wet to a 60%. So that way we have a little bit of a dry signal going in there. I'm going to turn it down a little bit on the fader. Okay, so now we have a compressor on the piano. The next thing I'm going to be adding is a saturator. Let's type it in the search bar once again. Saturate. Okay, don't have to type in the whole thing. We're going to go to Dynamics, go to Color Limiter, and we're going to choose Gentle Saturation. Saturation adds a little bit of grit and color to your signal. So I'm going to click and drag this down into the device view. And let's go ahead and play it. If we turn it off. So the change is very subtle, but you can still hear it. I'm going to make some adjustments here to the release. I'm going to change it to 300 milliseconds. The saturation, I'm going to bump it up to a 0.4. And the color, I'm going to put a 0.5. And the loudness, I'm going to leave it as it is. Let's go ahead and play this. And if we turn it off, turn it on. Okay, so we're going to click and highlight all of these plugins, and we're going to check the difference as to the original and what we have now. By hitting 0 on the computer keyboard, we can disable all the plugins on this track as long as we have them highlighted. So let's go ahead and press 0 and let's play this. So this is with it off. And let's go ahead and turn it on. And the last thing I will be adding to the piano is the reverb back to the piano. So you're going to go to the send A, and we're going to pump this up to about a -35 decibels. And if you're wondering where I'm getting that number, in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you're going to see the A reverb in the information bar. You're going to see the number as we're pulling it up. That's where I'm getting that number from. So we're going to go to -35. Okay. So let's go ahead and play this. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the kick. For the kick, I'm not going to do too much to it. I simply want to have it hit a little punchier, and we can achieve that by using an EQ. First and foremost, we're going to switch over to arrangement view, and we're going to select a part of the track that has the kick itself. Matter of fact, all of the tracks. We're going to select the brackets here, and we're going to use the loop feature. We're going to switch back to session view. We're going to solo the kick. We're going to click on the kick track itself, and in the search bar, we're going to type in EQ. Go to EQ and filters, and this time we're going to go to EQ8, drums, and we're going to start off with the preset of kick EQ1. So we're going to click and drag this down into the device view, and let's go ahead and play this. And if we turn it off, turn it on. So it's a little bit of the boxiness is kind of gone, but it's still there. So I'm going to make some adjustments here. I'm going to go to the first band here, and I'm going to switch this down to 820 Hertz. I'm going to leave the Q at 0.58. And on the second band here, I'm going to change this to 48 Hertz. 48, not 58. And then on the gain, we're going to drop this to a 5. And the Q, we're going to leave it at 65. And what's cool about this EQ is that if you press the little headphones button here, you can isolate those frequencies when you press on the band. So let's go ahead and play this. And if we click on the band and go to 3, so you can hear a little bit punchier there. And if we go to the high, okay, so we're going to want to drop a little bit of those frequencies. So I'm going to click this out again, and we're going to go to the third band, and we're going to go to 200 Hertz. And we're going to extend the Q to a 0.40. I'm going to type in 0.40. Let's listen to this. Let's play the turn this off and on. I'm going to actually move this a little bit higher and turn the Q up a little bit just to let some of these frequencies in between here. And then this one, we're going to drop a little bit. Matter of fact, I'm actually going to change this fifth one to a low pass. And I'm going to turn the Q. I'm going to move the frequency back a little bit, and let's play this. Let's go ahead and turn off the EQ. And turn it back on. And then on the 2, we're going to open up the Q just a little bit. And turn this off. Turn it back on. Now, as you can see, we actually put a little bit of gain on this EQ. So to control this gain that just went up, we're going to push the gain down a little bit. Probably down about 3 decibels. So let's go ahead and turn off the EQ. And we're going to see on the fader here. So you see it's hitting the fader, and we're going to turn this on. So it's about the same, and that's what I want. I don't want to gain any more volume than what it is. So I'm going to turn on the adaptive EQ or Q. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. I'm going to turn this off and turn it on. So it's a little bit punchier, less boxy. And let's go ahead and play it with the piano. Now if we turn it off, and turn it on, move this up. And this one open up a little bit. Okay, remember that we're going to be adjusting all the volume levels once we're done with editing all these instruments. So next, let's go ahead and move on to the snare. Now, for the snare, I'm going to make it sound a little bit brighter by using an EQ. Keep in mind that not everything has to be EQ'd. The reason that I'm using EQs on these drums is because I like my drums to sound bright and punchy. So I'm going to go to the snare, and I'm going to solo it. I'm going to click on the track, and I'm going to go to search, type in EQ. Go to EQ and filters, EQ8, and we're going to select a snare EQ1 preset, and we're going to drag and drop this down into the device view. So I'm going to turn on the little headphones here because I want to hear what frequencies I'm messing with. And I'm going to add another band in here. I'm going to move the third one a little bit closer here. And let's go ahead and play this. I'm going to listen to these frequencies. So I'm going to create number 6. I'm going to make it a shelf with a Q of a little bit sharper. I'm going to move this up. And a 3. We're going to widen up the Q on this one. I'm going to move the 6 a little bit further away. Move this one here. And we're going to go to 2. We're going to go to 1. We're going to make the 1 a little bit sharper. And we're going to pull this forward. I'm going to go to 3. Let's go ahead and play this. We're going to turn down the gain because we're gaining a little bit of output. We're going to move this down to a -5. We're going to turn on the adaptive Q. And let's go ahead and take a listen. Let's turn it off. Turn it on. So I'm going to move the 6th a little bit closer. We're going to drop the frequency to about a 5,500 kilohertz. And I'm going to move the Q a little bit sharper. And let's turn it off. And turn it on. So very subtle. I'm going to turn it off again. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the little headphones. And then let's go ahead and play it with the kick and the piano. If we turn off the EQ. We're going to move the band 1 a little bit left. So we can still have some of that low. Turn it off. Turn it on. And the last thing I'm going to add to the snare is some reverb. So once again, I'm going to look at the number on the bottom left, and I'm going to raise this to about a -30. Let's play this. Just the snare. Let's play it with the kick and the piano. Let's drop it down to about a -33. If we turn off the EQ. Okay. I'm liking the sound of that. And let's go ahead and move on to the hi-hat. Let's go ahead and solo the hi-hat. Now for this one, I want to make it a little bit brighter as well. So I'm going to go to EQ. And we're going to go to EQ and filters. And this time I'm going to do something different. We're going to click on EQ8 and we're going to drag this into the device view. So we're going to manually adjust this. So let's go ahead and play this. So automatically we can take out 1. We're going to convert the second into a low pass filter or high pass filter and move it closer. Turn on the little headphones. I'm going to change this from a shelf. I'm going to go to 3. I'm going to make the Q a little bit sharper. Let's go ahead and turn off the EQ. Turn it on. Let's change the 4 back to a shelf. I didn't like that. Let's go ahead and keep it back to where it was. Now let's go ahead and turn this off. Turn up the volume. Turn this off, on. So nothing too crazy, gonna keep it nice and simple. And we're gonna add a little bit of reverb to this. Gonna pull it up to about a negative. Okay, you can start hearing it there. We're gonna keep it at about a negative 38. Very, very subtle. It's the little things that matter. So let's go ahead and play it with the hi-hat, the kick, and the piano. If we turn off the EQ, turn it on. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the crash. Now, because the crash already has some reverb in it and it sounds bright as it is, the only thing I will be adding to the crash is a wide stereo to give it a wider stereo image to the track. So I'm going to go to the crash. I'm going to solo it. And let's go ahead and play it. I'm going to turn it up a little bit. And we're going to go to search, type in wide. We're going to go to utilities, utility, and we're going to insert a wide stereo into the device view. And we're going to leave this at 200. Let's go ahead and take a listen. Let's turn it off. Let's go ahead and pump this up to a 220. And you can hear this a lot more when you have your headphones in. Okay, and that is all we will be adding to the crash. We don't, like I said, we don't need to add reverb. You don't need to add reverb and EQ to every single instrument. So let's go ahead and move on to the tambourine. And for the tambourine, we're not going to be doing anything to it actually. The only thing we will be adding is a little bit of reverb. So we're going to solo the tambourine. And let's take a listen to this. Click on the tambourine and let's listen. We're going to pump it up. Okay, we're going to keep it at about a negative 28. Nice and subtle. Okay. And that is all we're going to be adding to the tambourine. Next, let's go ahead and move on to the arena brass. Now, for the arena brass, we will be adding a compressor. We've already kind of talked about a compressor and what it does. So let's go ahead and click on the arena brass. We're going to solo it. And we're going to go to the search bar, type in compressor, go to dynamics. And for this one, we're going to use another gentle squeeze here. And let's go ahead and start inputting some of these numbers. I'm going to go to the graph view once again. I'm going to play this first. I'm going to bring up the threshold. I'm going to turn up the volume. So you can see there it goes a little bit loud. So I'm going to go to another ratio of 3:1. For the attack, I want this to be a little bit quicker. I'm going to go to a 2. And for the release, because it is a sustained instrument, I'm going to go to 440. And for the dry and wet, I will be changing this to a 90. We're going to change this to peak. We want the makeup on. And the knee itself will be changed to a 2. I want it to be a little bit of a harsher compression. So let's go ahead and start bringing down the threshold. About right there. And you can see the signal in the fader, it stays sustained. It's not spiking, it's not dropping too much. So that's a nice. Okay, next we're going to be adding EQ because I am going to want to have a little bit of a more of a brassy sound to it. So we're going to go to EQ8 and we're going to drop this on top of the compressor. And we're going to go to the third band and we're going to go to 1500 kilohertz. And we're going to push this up to a 3.2. And we're going to put the Q to a 0.5. And let's go ahead and listen to this. Turn off the EQ first. And let's turn it on. Let's make the Q a little bit sharper. And bring up the gain. Turn it off. Turn it on. And we're going to use a little headphones here. And these are the frequencies that we're messing with. So I want it to be right here. Right there. Let's drop it. Gives it more of that brassy feel. So let's go ahead and highlight these plugins and press 0 to disable them so we can hear the difference of the original and what we did to it. So I'm going to press 0 and let's play it. And let's turn on the plugins. Okay. So we're going to leave the arena brass as it is right here. Remember, we're going to adjust all the levels after we get done with the rain and thunder here. So let's go ahead and move on to the rain and thunder. So we're going to click on the rain and thunder. We're going to solo it. Now, if you remember, we already have an EQ8 and a wide on here. So what I'm going to add to this is a compressor. So I'm going to go to search, go to compressor again, dynamics, and I want to use a gentle squeeze. Now the difference here is I'm going to slide it right between the EQ and the wide stereo. So I'm going to switch back to my graph. I'm going to leave the makeup, the peak, I'm going to change it to peak, and the dry and wet, I want this to be an 80%. And let's go ahead and bring up the threshold. We're going to change the ratio to a 3:1. The reason that I'm using a 3:1 over and over again is because some of these instruments are similar. But what I will be changing is the attack. So I'm going to use an attack of 1. I want it to react instantly. And for the release, because this is a long track, I'm going to be using a 300 millisecond release. And for the knee, I will be changing this to a 2.5. And let's bring down the threshold as we're listening to it. Let's switch over to arrangement view and let's find where that thunder strikes, because that's what we're trying to control. That's the point of me adding this compressor in here, to be specific. So I'm going to switch back. Okay. So you can see where the signal just goes crazy up high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this again. And you can see, let's say we can probably put the threshold to right here. So I'm going to drop the threshold. And you can see that the volume does not go up, and you can see how much gain reduction is happening. It's a lot of compression, but this is the point of this track. I want it to be nice and subtle in the background. So I'm going to turn this down. And I'm going to unmute it. I'm going to let it play with the rest of the track. Okay, so we've cleaned up every instrument individually. Like I said, this is my process. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to start leveling out all of these instruments and getting them to sound nice and cohesive. So let's go ahead and begin the leveling process. I'm going to first make sure that the instruments are playing all at the same time. So I'm going to switch over to arrangement view and I'm going to slide this loop over. So you can see all the instruments are playing on this part here. I'm going to switch over back to session view. I'm going to lower all of the tracks volumes and I'm going to bring them in one by one. I like to personally start with the drums because I feel like they add the rhythm, the little sway and the little feel to the dancing that people get. So I'm going to start off with the kick. So I'm going to start playing the track and I'm going to bring it in. I'm going to leave it at a -2. We can see the master fader here. It's okay. Next, we're going to bring in the snare. be too harsh there. So you leave it at 4. And next, the hi-hat. I'm going to drop it to about a -5, -6. Now we're moving up to about 5.3. Next, the crash. We're going to have to stop it here, and we're going to bring it in a little bit louder. Let's try that again. Okay. Next, the tambourine. Let's go ahead and play the track as we bring it in. We're going to drop it down to about a negative. We're going to drop the tambourine down to about a -12.5 because I don't want it to mix too much with the hi-hat. Let's leave it at a -12. And next, let's bring in the keys. That's the main. Let's push the keys up to about a -5.3. Brass. I want the brass to be kind of in the subtle background, not too overpowering. You can still listen to it. I mean, you can still hear it, and you can hear the big effect when we take it out. So we take it out. If we play it. We're going to bring in the rain and thunder. We're going to bring this up as it plays. It's a -21. Let's switch it over to where the thunder strikes. Slightly to -22. And let's go ahead and play it to where some of these instruments come in and come out. Okay, and you can see that the master fader is okay. There's nothing overpowering or clipping. Okay, now one of the last things that we're going to do to this before we master anything is we're going to add some panning. Panning is when you move the instrument to either left or right of the stereo image. So we're going to go to the hi-hat and we're going to push the pan to the left 13. Once again, I'm getting that number from the bottom left-hand corner where you can see the information. I'm going to go to about a 13 left. I want the crash to be in the center because we do have a wide in there. And I want the tambourine to offset a little bit of the hi-hat. So we're going to go right 14. And let's go to a part where you have the hi-hat and the tambourine playing. So we're going to go, let's say, about here. We're going to do this, and let's play this. if we solo it, you can better hear this when you have the headphones on. So we're going to push the tambourine a little bit more to the right to about a 16. And the hi-hat a little bit more to the left at a 15. So now it feels like the instruments are a little bit more around you. Let's go ahead and unsolo it. And let's press play. This creates a much more immersive stereo image. So now that we have the levels figured out, we have the panning done, now we can start moving on to the mastering process. Now, there are multiple ways you can approach the mastering process. One of the terms you're going to hear repeatedly is the mastering chain signal. This refers to the order in which you're placing your plugins in the master channel. Some of the orders include EQ, followed by a multiband compressor, followed by a saturator, followed by a limiter. Another one is EQ, followed by a multiband compressor, followed by another EQ, followed by a saturator, followed by a limiter. There are multiple plugins and effects that you can use on your master channel. There are no rules, really. It's really up to you and what you're shooting for. And if you don't want to deal with any of the manual settings, you can actually go to the audio effects here, go to the search bar, and type in master. Go to utilities, go to audio effects rack, and in here, you're going to have a variety of presets of masters that you can mess with. But we're not going to do that today. What we're actually going to do is we're going to use an EQ, a saturator, and a limiter. We're not going to be using a multi-band compressor because we've already controlled some of those frequencies. And so we're going to go ahead and switch over to session view. We're going to click on the master channel, and we're going to go ahead and type EQ. We're going to go to EQ and filters. We're going to go to EQ8, and we're going to click and drag this down into the master channel. Now we're going to do this manually, so it's going to take a little bit of time. And we're going to go ahead and turn on all these bands except for the 8th. And we're going to move them over. Keep this 3rd one here. The 4th one we're going to bring back. The 5th one we're going to move forward. The 6th, bring it back a little bit. And then the 7th, we'll keep it here. Okay, so we're going to turn on the little headphones, and we're going to be able to listen to the entire frequency here as we're going through these bands. So we're going to go to the arrangement view, and we're going to select a loop of the entire arrangement here with all the instruments playing. And let's go ahead and press play. First going through all these to see what kind of frequencies we're messing with. Okay, so for the first one here, I'm going to use a shelf here. And we're going to go ahead and type in a 24 hertz on the frequency. We're going to use a gain of about 2. I want a little bit more low end. And on the Q, I'm going to use a 5. On the second one here, we're going to go to 54 hertz. And I'm going to go to leave it at 37 gain and the 71 Q. On the third one here, we're going to go to 135 hertz. The gain, we're going to go ahead and put it up to 1.2. Then on the Q, we're going to leave it at a 1.7. Let's go ahead and listen to this. Move on to the fourth here. We're going to go to 337 on the fourth band. And we're going to use a gain of 0.12. The Q is going to remain at 71. The fifth band, we're going to go ahead, let's take a listen. Let's leave that there. Let's go to the sixth band, and we're going to listen to this. to drop this down to a negative 1.5. The Q we're going to leave at a 0.6. And for the seventh here, let's take a listen to the seventh. I'm going to change this to a 0.5. I'm going to leave this at a 1.4. And we're going to change the hertz to 6 kilohertz to 6,530. And let's take a listen to this. And we're going to turn it off right now. Let's go ahead and listen, and then we'll turn it off. So it makes the track sound a little bit fuller across all the frequencies. The next thing we're going to add here is a saturator. So we're going to go to the search and we're going to type in saturator. We're going to go to drive and color and we're going to choose a bit warmer. We're going to click and drag this down into the device view. We're going to leave the drive at 6.19. We're going to leave the DC on. The color, we're going to turn it on. We're going to change this sign full to analog clip. And we're going to do soft clip on. The output we're going to leave at 0. The bass is going to be left at 0. The frequency will be pushed to 500. The width will be pushed to a 35%. The depth will be a -8. And the dry and wet will be a 40%. So let's go ahead and play this. So you can see that this is already clipping, so this is not good. So we're going to turn this down just slightly on the output. So if we turn it off. So the EQ is actually making it clip as well. So we're going to turn down the EQ to about a -3. Let's turn it off first and see where the signal is clipping here before the EQ. We're going to click here to reset it. Okay, so -3 works good. Next, we're going to check the saturator. So you can see it was the EQ that was clipping the master here. So next we're going to go ahead and let's play this again. Let's select both of the plugins here and we're going to hit 0 to disable them. And let's bring them in as we play it so we can hear the difference. This is disabled. Okay, next we're going to be adding a limiter. So we're going to go to the search bar and we're going to type in limiter. We're going to go to dynamics and we're going to go to master limiter. We're going to click and drag this into the device view. Now for this one, we're going to change the loudness to a 1.3, 1.13. The release will be a 600. We don't want any saturation in here because we already have some saturation from different plugins and different instruments. And we're going to leave the color at 50. So let's go ahead and play this. And if we turn it off. Let's go ahead and turn them off and play it and bring it in as it plays. This is off. This is on. So as you can see with those 3 plugins, you can get a really nice level booster and make it sound like an overall full track. And the trick to getting a good master is getting a good mix. Now, if you're interested in listening to the finished track, it is uploaded to the streaming services, and I'll leave the link in the description below. So thank you guys for watching. If there's anything that I missed or anything you need clarification on, please leave it in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching this series, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this series. Subscribe, like, and share, and I'll see you at the next session.